Should presidents have to take 12 sessions of ayahuasca before they take a turn to become a president? That sounds like a crazy question, right? I mean, ayahuasca, what is ayahuasca?
If I could make it compulsory, I would also require any person heading for high political office to have 12 sessions with ayahuasca or with extended route.
12 is a lot to ask.
You need 12 because the first few can be
overwhelming.
Or nothing. Nothing can happen sometimes. It's a medicine that you need to work with for a long time. But what it does is it opens the heart and it opens the mind. And I would suggest that people who want to be leaders either might end up leading in a much better way or might end up choosing not to be leaders at all.
So the question is, does ayahuasca have any medical benefits? Or does it actually have true benefit within your consciousness, within maybe a disease that you've created, which could be psychosomatic? I mean, I believe the possibilities are endless. I believe that, yes, it could actually help you.
What do you got here?
So that's my first experience with ayahuasca. I'm with Don Francisco Montes Shuna, who's an Amazonian shaman in Iquitos, and this is 2003. And we are picking leaves from the chacruna bush. It's called Psychotria viridis, and those leaves contain DMT. And then 20 years later, here I am with Francisco again. I've got less hair, and Francisco has definitely aged as well. And this was about 3 weeks ago. I had an ayahuasca session then. One of the most, in some ways, one of the most helpful sessions that I've ever had. I suffer from migraines, very bad migraine headaches. They're a curse of my life. This session that I had with Francisco, I focused the whole session on please help me with my migraines. That was the whole thing it was about. And I didn't have the entity encounters, and I didn't have many of the things that happen with ayahuasca, but I had, this is going to sound nuts to people who think I'm nuts, but I'm going to say it anyway. I had a circle of serpents that appeared in front of me, and they were all intertwined around each other, and they came closer and closer to my forehead, and in the middle of them was a bright light, and it came right down onto my forehead. And I started to feel afraid, as one does in a deeply altered state of consciousness sometime. And I was kind of backing off, and I said, I want this to stop. And a voice said to me, just shut up and get out of our way. We're trying to help you. And I said, okay. Wow. And I surrendered. And I let it go the full course. The net result is that in the 3 weeks since then, when I might have taken 15 or 20 of those pharmaceutical medicines, I've taken one, just one. And I can't help associating it directly with that ayahuasca experience and focusing my intention on that happening, and Francisco helping me with that as well.
So basically what they are saying is that it's a portal that takes you to a place when your inner conscience becomes vivid. And that being said, a lot of people have been, I think there's new studies at Harvard that they are actually studying psychedelics and the effects of psychedelics. When I was 18 years old, I was living in the west coast of Canada, and I decided to, do some mushrooms. And I did a lot of mushrooms. We had a whole bag of them, and I ended up taking like way too much. And I prayed and I said to myself, I would never, ever touch that drug ever again. But I remember before that exact day, I used to enjoy doing a little bit of mushroom. I always felt it opened up a dimension towards my subconscious mind. And it just made me more conscious about life, things around me, and it made me ask questions.
It's a good mystery. The other thing is the geometrical patterns are very common experience in ayahuasca visions in altered states of consciousness. Our culture tends to despise altered states of consciousness, although fortunately that's changing. But in the Amazon and many indigenous cultures, they're regarded as extremely important, that we can't confine ourselves to the everyday wide awake state of consciousness that requires us to interface with the physical world. There are other states of consciousness which are also valuable and which bring teachings. And it's just one of those facts that most people who drink ayahuasca, most of the time, some point will experience geometrical visions. So there's a question: is there a connection here between the use of ayahuasca and the geometrical patterns?
So this summer, I was just hanging out in my cottage up north in the countryside of Quebec. And I like to have a glass of wine, and usually I'll like to have one puff of weed. And this is where I got the idea for this podcast. And I thought, it's strange how maybe just one puff of weed, I'm not saying smoking a whole joint, just that one puff of weed opens up a dimension of, I would call it the realm of creativity. And if these drugs were on our planet, I mean, they're natural, you just pick them up and you can take them. What if all these Egyptians or these Mayans and the vision they had, could it be that maybe some of these drugs open up a porthole to a different dimension and just opens up the realm of creativity? Because without creativity, you don't evolve. Like you don't create new cell phones, you don't create new computers, you don't create AI. All this comes from creativity. So let's say 10,000 years ago, we're not that evolved, we're hunters and gatherers, and the first hunters and gatherers decided to try these drugs. They're just on the planet. And that changed something within themselves. Like, let's say you're at a level that you're almost a primate, like a monkey or something like that. But that is the beginning of questioning yourself, and that is the beginning of creativity, and maybe looking at the world or the sky or the space, whatever it is, differently. And you start asking questions, because when you're just in normal day, you don't escape. And I have to use that word because it is an escape to a different dimension. So what if in the future, monkeys, apes, they start using it for themselves by their own will, finding it and saying, I'm gonna. And what would change within their creativity? What would happen afterwards? And I know it's a very, very, it's a subject that's still taboo, but we need to be open-minded about it.
While we remain largely ignorant about ourselves and what we're doing here and what's happening in our inner realms and what is revealed in altered states of consciousness, we haven't done enough. And there's a role for exploration in that realm too. Not simply random explanation. Anybody who wants to take DMT is welcome to, as far as I'm concerned. But targeted exploration to see what happens in the DMT state. What are these entities? Right. Why is it that people from different countries and different cultures encounter clearly the same entities and receive the same messages from them? Do we all have some kind of brain module that just makes this up? Or, as we were saying earlier, does it just open the door to a whole other level of reality that we're normally shut off from? And which may be extremely helpful to us. It may also be extremely dangerous to us. Who knows? But without exploring, we're never going to find out.
Well, we do have physicists that talk about neighboring dimensions that are inaccessible.
Yeah.
So this is not like a completely new concept.
No, it's not. It's not a new concept. That notion of parallel dimensions is already accepted largely by science, and this is a technology for exploring those.
That's one that sounds so abstract. When you talk to people about parallel dimensions, that the notion of parallel dimensions has been accepted by science, you're like, what are you saying? Like, what does that mean? Like parallel dimensions, and unless you've had a psychedelic experience, it does seem super abstract. It seems like something that people just say. It doesn't seem like something that, which is one of the weirder things about psychedelic experiences, that when you're there, you're like, how is this real? Mm-hmm. How is this real and this accessible? How is this close? And how does my mind make this?
Yeah.